Darkcast Network. The light shines brightest on our indie podcasts.
Two suspects are being. One case involves the FBI is now offering $100,000 to see if the police are releasing marathon.
Welcome to Misty Mysteries. I'm your host Keely, and this is a true crime and paranormal podcast. I want to officially welcome you to the spooky season. It is now October. I know spooky season starts for some of you in September, but no one can say it is not spooky season now. This month, Misty Mysteries is jam-packed with great content featuring guests from other podcasts. I will be appearing on some other podcasts as well. Today's episode is going to start with a trigger warning for a few things. There is a child's death involved, talks of self-harm, and suicide. On this episode, I will be discussing the death of a 12-year-old boy named Sean Daugherty. His death has been ruled a suicide, but his family is still searching for answers. They have a petition going at the moment to get Sean's case reopened and looked at by another agency to help find these answers. I will be sharing this petition at the end of the episode as well, but for right now, I want to tell you where you can find this petition. You can find the petition at change.org/whathappenedtoshawn.
Good evening, creeps. You know, everybody's entitled to one good scare on Halloween.
I told you, you need to go check on the children.
But the podcasts of the Darkcast Network have enough scares to fill even the largest trick-or-treat sack.
No razor blades, I promise.
Join the pods of the Darkcast Network, including Murder News, Sinister Story Hour, Beyond the Rainbow, Cause of Death, October Pod AM, Rogue Darkness, Over the Fence, and me, Brenda, host of Horrifying History, for a pajama jammy jam of deliciously dark, devilish, and disturbing Halloween treats.
There was always something eerie about the second floor of this house.
We are like the house handing out full-size Snicker bars for your ears. And we're coming to this podcast, yes, the one you're listening to right now, on October 31st. That's Halloween Day 2022 on your favorite podcast streaming apps.
A long time ago, a man murdered his wife in that room.
Don't forget to wear your coziest pajamas for the Darkcast Network Halloween Sleepover, coming to this podcast on Halloween Day.
Let's talk about who Sean was. Sean Daugherty was born on November 8th, 2009, to his father Timothy Daugherty and mother Ramona Ramirez. Sean's parents were separated, but Timothy and Ramona were very loving to Sean and didn't seem to have any issues co-parenting. Sean was close and well connected with his family. His family describes him as being a loving and empathetic kid. Sean was a happy and healthy 12-year-old boy who inspired to become president of the United States one day. He did good in school and made straight A's. His stepdad Jared shared that Sean loved to read, and he could read a lot faster than Jared could. He described Sean as just an amazing person. He was great in school and the teachers loved him. Outside of school, Sean loved to swim and play video games. He was a huge fan of Star Wars and Disney. He loved Disney so much that in celebration of just how good he and his older sister, Maria, had been doing in school, his mom and stepdad actually took Sean and his siblings on a Disney cruise for spring break. And when they got home from this cruise, Sean was excited for a lot of things. The first was another Disney cruise the family had planned for August of 2022, and the second was a big move. Sean's mom, Ramona, and stepdad, Jared, are high-ranking officers in the United States Air Force. And Sean, as someone who inspired to be president one day, he was excited to say that with this move, his mom would be working at the Pentagon. He was hoping that he could visit the Pentagon and get some special candies from there. Right before this big move, in April of 2022, Sean and his family were living in Yorktown, Virginia. It seemed like a very quiet and safe place to live. Sean lived in a safe neighborhood with his mom, Ramona, stepdad, Jared, older sister, 16-year-old Maria, and two younger brothers, 5-year-old Ethan and 2-year-old Hunter, as well as his 79-year-old grandma, But because they had been living there since the pandemic, they had some friends, but they didn't build a very strong connection to the community. The family was getting ready for their move that was coming up in just a matter of weeks when Sean's life was taken in a way that has his family fighting for answers. On April 14th, 2022, Sean was found hanging from the swing set in his backyard by his older sister, Maria. At this time, I want to use the information the family and their victim advocate have put together to tell you what happened on this day. This day started off as a normal day for the family. They had actually still been in very high spirits from the cruise and got passports just 2 days before for their next Disney cruise. Sean went to school just like any other weekday and got off the bus after school around 3:02 p.m. He walked a short distance from where the bus dropped him off to his home that was just about 2 houses away. When he walked into the front door, his grandmother was in a rush to make it to a doctor's appointment. His mom, Ramona, needed to take her to this, and she had just gotten off of work, so she was sitting outside waiting for Sean's grandmother. And his stepdad was already at an appointment with his 5-year-old brother. This left Sean babysitting his 2-year-old brother, who was taking a nap on the couch. Ramona called out to Sean that she was going to be calling him from the car, and it was only going to be about an hour, which didn't bother Sean because he loved spending time with his little brother, plus his brother was asleep. During this time, Sean had a list of things he needed to do after school before he could play video games with his friends, just like any normal day. He first did his homework, which he submitted to his teacher at 3:09 p.m. One of these homework assignments even including a picture of him holding the homework. His mom called from the car after his homework was done and asked Sean if he could wake his brother, feed him a snack, and spend some time with him, which Sean told her he got it, but he was going to the bathroom at the moment, and they made a few jokes before ending the call. After this, Ramona called again around 3:27 p.m. after realizing Sean may want to play his games and told him that he could bring his little brother upstairs to play video games with him. Sean was super excited to do this and told his mom he was going to set that all up, and then they ended the call. From here, we don't know the exact series of events, but this is what his family believes happened that day. Sean opened up jarred peaches and put one in a bowl, most likely for a snack, but his alarm to do his chores goes off at 3:30 p.m. His chores was to collect the trash from the bathroom and the kitchen to throw it all away, which he did, but the trash never got taken out. It wasn't until 4:30 p.m. that his sister Maria came home in a rush from her tennis match after school. She needed to change her clothes because her boyfriend and his mom were going to be picking her up so she could go to his lacrosse game. But when she got home, the front door was locked, which wasn't normal for the family. Maria rang the doorbell, she knocked, and she called her mom because she thought no one was home. Her mom told her that Sean was home and to call him. He was probably just gaming upstairs and didn't hear her. She then called Sean twice and texted him with no answer. Till 4:50 p.m. rolls around and she didn't hear back from him. She just decided to go through the back door. When she got into the backyard, she froze, trying to figure out what she was seeing. Someone was hanging from their swing set in their backyard. She looked to see if she could run into the house to get away from whoever it was, but she quickly realized that they weren't moving or paying any attention to her. She checked her surroundings and made eye contact with the neighbor's gardener, who was mowing their lawn and seemed just as confused by what was happening. She yelled out to the person hanging as she walked closer, "Hello, hello," before realizing that the person hanging was her little brother, Sean. Sean was wearing his stepdad's clothes, had no shoes on, and had a motorcycle helmet bag over his head, which is why she probably didn't recognize him at first. But when she knew it was Sean, she ran over to him to lift him up to release the pressure on his head with one arm while she called 911 with the other. For this, I say head and not neck, because the string that was hanging Sean was actually underneath his chin and not around his neck. She made her call around 4:54 p.m. and she quickly did what she could to save Sean. She was able to lift him off of the string holding him by slipping 3 fingers under the string and got him to the ground, where she performed CPR for 6 minutes with the 911 dispatcher until EMTs arrived on scene to take over. The EMTs struggled to apply the AED they needed to shock him when taking over because Sean had a belt tied around his waist, holding his hands that was so tight it was difficult for the EMTs to even get undone. The house at this point had become covered with emergency service vehicles, and when Ramona got home from her mother's appointment, all she saw was her home surrounded by these emergency vehicles and workers. As she ran to see what was happening, she saw the EMTs working to save Sean's life, but she had no idea what was happening at the time, what happened to Sean, or where her other children were. The police kept trying to tell Ramona to keep her distance so they could work on Sean, when she saw Maria running towards her, and they both realized they had no idea where 2-year-old Hunter was. Ramona ran inside, scanned the home, and saw 2 little legs hiding behind the laundry. She picked up Hunter, and he didn't seem hurt, but she could tell by his eyes he had been crying and his body just seemed limp. He just did not seem himself. After getting her youngest, she ran out the front door, and she noticed her neighbors were outside with their gardener and another neighbor was mowing his lawn. She was asking them what happened, but they all said they had not seen or heard anything. At this time, she saw the ambulance pulling away, and they wouldn't let her ride with Sean. She needed help, but Jared was still 40 minutes away with Ethan. She called her boss, who went over right away, and she called Jared, who grabbed Ethan and rushed home. Ramona was driven to the hospital where Sean was being taken by the fire department, while Maria's boyfriend's mother, Jamie, stayed with Maria and the children. When Ramona got to the hospital, she was taken to the room where they worked on Sean, but sadly Sean was not able to be revived. Ramona was given time to be with Sean before Jared arrived at the hospital, when she noticed that Sean was in Jared's clothes. This made her feel like someone hurt Sean, and that person may still be in her house. She made a call to law enforcement on scene, and the house was searched, but there was no signs of anyone else in the house. The family was instructed that night to stay at a hotel, but Jared and Ramona were still at the hospital. So Jamie and Ramona's boss helped pack the remaining family in their cars and take them to the hospital while the police began to investigate into Sean's death. The investigators began by taking pictures of the backyard and the house. They documented everything they saw. They took Sean's phone, laptop, and iPad, and by midnight the investigators had cleared the house for the family to come back home. Coming back to the house without Sean, and from everything they had just experienced, was very difficult, but they decided to return home that night instead of staying at a hotel. Immediately walking into the house, things felt off, but the family decided to go slow, staying together in the living room, while figuring out just how to start, not only dealing with grief, but being in this house. Ramona first went into the kitchen, where she noticed the bowl on the countertop with an uneaten peach. She then noticed 2 trash bags had been tied up and left on the floor, with Sean's Crocs upside down right next to them. She noticed that Sean had put a new bag in and called Jared over to point out how odd it was that he left the trash bags on the floor but put a new bag in the trash can. This is when Jared noticed 2 additional bags on the floor that had been ripped up. But to make things even more odd, the bags had blue handles on them when Ramona only bought Costco bags in bulk for years at this point, which had red handles, like the bags next to Sean's Crocs. Things from here continued to feel wrong and not add up to Sean's parents. When they walked upstairs, they noticed how hot it was, and their thermostat had been set to 85, which was not a normal temperature they set in their home. Then Ramona walked into her room, and right in front of her pathway from her door was Sean's underwear. Jared went to grab gloves and a bag for Sean's underwear because they felt this was not normal. He didn't change in his parents' room. There was no need for him to. Plus, all of Jared's drawers on his dresser were open. In hopes to get some rest, Jared barricaded all the doors with chairs, and the whole family slept together in Ramona and Jared's room. When the next day rolled around, after a not very restful night, the family found more odd things in their home. Jamie, the mother, Maria's boyfriend, came by to feed the family and help them out when she noticed a large handprint on their back door, as well as red marks on the walls that looked as if they could be blood, which his mother, Ramona, remembers seeing some blood on his fingers when he was in the hospital. When the police came by to further investigate and talk to the family, Ramona insisted that they take these prints found on the door and remembers being told that they got a good copy of the prints. While at the house, the neighbors were talked to see if anyone witnessed anything suspicious, and no neighbors or anyone working in the neighborhood that day reported seeing anything. One neighbor even had a camera that pointed towards his backyard, but his cameras were not working. It seems like the only witness was Sean's 2-year-old brother, and when his mom asked him what happened to Sean, he told her that Sean's friend was over and started making punchy motions, as if someone was fighting with Sean. Unfortunately, he is 2 years old, and it's hard for law enforcement to use someone this young as a witness or really understand what he saw. During their investigation, Sean's teachers, friends, and families never reported any issues with self-harm, depression, or suicidal ideations. The investigators were told about some issues with bullying months before his death, but it had been dealt with very early on and didn't seem to continue. No searches were found in Sean's devices for anything related to self-harm or suicide. His family never reported any marks or bruises on his neck or body that seemed self-inflicted, and Maria told police she didn't feel the way that he was hanging was self-inflicted. As I kind of mentioned earlier, the string was around Sean's chin and head area, and his feet had been almost dragging on the floor, but they were still clean even though the ground was muddy from defrosting with the spring weather. Maria drew a sketch for the investigators of how she remembers finding him, but they were never taken from her. His glasses had also been found broken on the ground next to him, which his mother shares he needed to see. The string he was hanging from had been discovered to be the string from a motorcycle helmet bag, much like the one that was over his head. Jared had a pile of these in the garage that they were getting rid of with their move. And the odd thing with that is that because both Ramona and Jared had military jobs, next to these bags, they had plenty of supplies with different type of ropes. Sean's family is left with so many questions and suspicions after the death of their 12-year-old son and brother. Like, if it was a suicide, why didn't he leave a note? What happened to Sean's clothes? Why was he wearing his stepdad's clothes? Where did the blue-handled trash bags come from? And why were they ripped? What evidence or finding did the police find, since they have never shared any of it with the family? Despite all of the questions, the family felt the investigators never had any answers for them, and when the medical examiner marked his cause of death to be a self-inflicted hanging, his case was closed and marked as a suicide. At this point, his family is only looking for help to answer their questions. They want to know exactly what happened, and if someone hurt Sean, they want this person off the streets. His family went to the Department of the Air Force Office of Special Investigations for help, but they said since it looks to be an open and shut case to them, they couldn't help. His family has now hired a private investigator and have a petition to get Sean's case reopened and sent to different agencies. They have also been putting pressure on the York Procure Sheriff's Office, which they were met with a video described on their Facebook as cold, uncaring, defensive, and an attempt to discredit the family's account of what happened to Sean. I'm going to play that video for you now.
Recent statements have caused concern in the community that the death of a 12-year-old on April the 14th, 2022, has not been fully investigated by the sheriff's office, and that there may be a killer in our area that poses a threat. Nothing could be further from the truth. It has been the long-standing policy of the York-Pocosin Sheriff's Office to not release information relating to cases of suicide, particularly those cases that involve children. We do everything within our power to preserve the privacy of the grieving family. We take these matters very seriously, evaluate all evidence, and consider all possibilities. The York-Pocosin Sheriff's Office is aware of a recent social media site created to provide the public with theories surrounding the death of this 12-year-old. Much of the information being posted to this social media site is opinion, innuendo, and fabrication, which is not consistent with the evidence that was collected by Sheriff's Office investigators during their investigation. Once that evidence was collected, it was submitted to the Department of Forensic Science for evaluation, and later to the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. By law, in Virginia, it is the Chief Medical Examiner's responsibility to determine the manner and cause of death which they, the Chief Medical Examiner's office, determined to be a suicide. There were several key points that were made in this video that the Sheriff's Office will address. First, in the video, the mother said, "They have told me a few times that they really don't know how to investigate this kind of murder case because it's really complicated." The implication being we, the York-Pocoshin Sheriff's Office. That statement is absolutely not true and was never made to this mother. The evidence collected and documentation shows many discrepancies in the version that was put forth on the family's page. The videos and photos you see on their social media site are not from the actual scene. They have been fabricated. First, the video of the man walking in front of their house is from 1 month after the incident, not the day of the incident. 2, the blood spatter image depicted in the video was not from the scene. However, we went back to the home on May 20th, 2022 at the request of the family. During that visit, the mother pointed out a red stain on the wall in the upstairs area of the home. Investigators photographed that stain on that date. Later, investigators reviewed the photographs that were taken on April the 14th, 2022, the day of the tragedy, and that stain was not present on that wall on April the 14th, 2022. In the mother's video, she states that her 2-year-old child witnessed the events that occurred in the house. During a recorded interview on April the 14th, 2022, between the mother and Sheriff's Office investigators, she stated when she left the house that afternoon, her mother to an appointment, the child was asleep. When she returned home after the tragedy had been discovered, she is quoted as saying to the Sheriff's Office investigator, quote, "Thank God he was still asleep," meaning the 2-year-old. The information that she stated in her video about the 2-year-old has never been disclosed to the Sheriff's Office. In the mother's video, she stated there was mud in the backyard, even refers to it as swampy, and she noted that there was no dirt on the 12-year-old's feet. Images from the day of the incident on April the 14th show that the grass was not wet and the yard was not swampy. There have been many statements on this website regarding the alleged staging of the scene. The photo of the backyard displayed on the social media site shows a swing set and a chair. It's important to note that the swings that are wrapped over the top post of the swing set and the chair were moved by York County Fire and Life Safety personnel in order to create enough space to render life-saving measures. The chair was moved from its original location under the swing by fire and life safety personnel. The 12-year-old was hanging to the front of the swing set, and the swings were moved to provide workspace. Our investigation determined that the chair was originally located on the deck at the rear of the home and was moved to the swing set area. Also, during the course of our investigation, DNA samples were collected from the cord that the 12-year-old was found suspended from. This cord was not a shoestring. It came from a motorcycle helmet bag that belonged to the stepfather that had been previously located in the garage. The 12-year-old's DNA was the only DNA found on this cord. Specifically, the DNA swabs were taken from the knot placed in that cord, and the only DNA on that knot belonged to the 12-year-old. In the video, there's an allegation that members of the YPSO, the York-Pocoshin Sheriff's Office, washed blood from the 12-year-old. At no point did any member of the Sheriff's Office clean or remove any blood from the scene or the child. At the hospital, investigators placed bags over the 12-year-old's hands prior to him being transported to the medical examiner's office. This is common practice to prevent the loss of any potential trace evidence. Based on the fact that the family was telling us that neighbors had information that they were providing to the family about possible suspects, our investigators went back to interview those neighbors, and none provided any additional information or new investigative leads. There is a statement in the mother's video about the unusual location of the 12-year-old's underwear. The clothing that the 12-year-old was wearing when he was located that day belonged to his stepfather, to include the stepfather's shirt, pants, belt, and stepfather's underwear. The 12-year-old's underwear were found in the same room where his stepfather's clothes were kept. Several theories were presented to the Sheriff's Office investigators by the family. The first theory provided to the family about what happened that day stated that they believed that this was a burglary, and during the burglary, their 12-year-old was sexually assaulted and murdered. However, Sheriff's Office investigators found no evidence of an intruder, and laboratory and medical evaluations of forensic evidence sent to the laboratory found no signs of sexual assault. The second theory presented by the family was that this was carried out as a military-type operation directed at them, the family, due to their rank in the United States Air Force. And finally, they identified 3 different people based solely on speculation that they frequented the neighborhood. All 3 of these people were located, and Sheriff's Office investigators eliminated them as persons of interest in this incident. As I stated at the beginning of this video, it is our policy not to discuss these issues in public, particularly when they involve children. However, the social media site has caused great concern within our community.
Now, I don't know about you, but for me, that video did feel very cold and kind of defensive. The ME was also, in the article that I found this video, the ME was also asked about the case, and the ME said they cannot speak on these cases, but if a family is inclined to believe that something was wrong, they can request a new autopsy or examination. Now that you have heard the sheriff's response, I want to read to you an official response from Sean's family on this video. We are disappointed in the response from the York Percourse Sheriff's Office to our plea for help. They released a video that is cold, uncaring, and defensive. They attempted to discredit our accounts of the events by stating that our story is untrue. We are asking for them to allow an outside entity to investigate this case, since they are no longer interested in going any further. We unfortunately do have to address some things that were said in this video. Over the course of several weeks, we filmed the property and its surroundings to see if anyone would revisit the scene of the crime. There was an individual who was filmed numerous times throughout several nights. They show a red mark on the wall from May 20th, 2022. This was a new red mark. When they wait 5 weeks to collect evidence, there will be new marks. This was one of the many spots throughout the house that were pointed out to the investigators. No one knows if my 2-year-old was sleeping during the hour he was alone. No one else was there. Initially, it was assumed that he was, and the mother was grateful that he was unharmed and said so. Later in the evening, when she was reunited with her son, he said that there had been a man in the house, and this was disclosed. We refer to the string as a shoelace-type string because that is what the autopsy describes it as. It is in similar size, and it was from the motorcycle bag. That bag was also on his head. The string, of course, had his DNA as it was on his body. We did provide leads to the police in hopes that they would look into people who were in the area at the time. We didn't realize we would be mocked for doing so. Shouldn't they be the ones looking for leads? This is what they choose to focus on instead of answering a few questions that have been lingering for some time. Sean's arms were belted tightly to his body. How did he put a bag over his head and a string over that while his hands were belted down? Sean's glasses were broken. He could not see. Where is the missing lens? Sean did not leave a note. He did not search how to commit suicide. He did not communicate with any strangers online. Sean submitted all of his upcoming assignments online as soon as he got home from school. He had also prepared himself a snack, which was left uneaten on the counter. Sean was babysitting his little brother. There are a dozen of things that do not add up. We are asking for another entity to take the case over and investigate with a fresh set of eyes. Isn't everyone entitled to a second opinion? If you have any information that would aid our investigation, please email whathappenedtoshawn@gmail.com or call the tip line at 804-905-8613. Nikki Young from the Serial Napper True Crime Podcast ended her episode on Sean by saying, "Justice means finding the truth, and they have not found it," which I think is a wonderful way to look at what Sean's family is fighting for. They're just fighting for a fresh look, some answers to what happened to their baby. Before leaving today, for those struggling, I want to acknowledge the struggle of mental health. I myself live with mental health disorders. I acknowledge your struggle and know that it can be hard. Know that you are loved. Know that you are heard. If you are in crisis or having suicidal thoughts in America, you can call or text 988. If it is an emergency, always call emergency services or go to the nearest hospital. I will have more resources available in the episode notes for all of my international listeners. But just know you are not alone. For now, please stay safe, stay hydrated, and I will see you next week.